Hey guys, this is Kirob speaking, and in today's little dev update we are going to take a look at some of the first features that have been implemented into the engine designer that were on the list, or were they, for a light campaign v4.2, because this edition of the little dev update is the feature creep edition, and you're going to love it. Anyway, this is about-ish the extent of the feature creep that we discussed that would be viable, so don't expect too much else to be diverting from the original plans, but I thought, and the others as well, that these additions will be very valuable in the long run, and now is the time, the very last time we can feasibly implement them. So let's go ahead and do that. So what do we have? Well, let me just load up an engine and we shall show you. And just keep in mind, this is very early development stage of these features, or, well, they have been fleshed out and stuff, but there are errors in here still and just unfinished stuff. So, what is going on here? Well, first things first, we do have a family quality slider now that does a lot of things. It affects everything almost, and that one will be very expensive for you to up. But this is also something that you only can do the first pass. So if you design an engine which has poor family quality, well, that's it. If you facelift the engine, you can't change the quality anymore. Not for the family, at least. So you're stuck with it, and that means that it is much more of a compromise that you need to make now versus engineering time and so on to get a really good engine. If you want to unlock the engine's full potential, then you do need to have that one up this a bit and just suck it up with the engineering time and costs that incurs. Yeah, long-running engine models versus the shorter-term ones definitely affect what you want to set here for the quality. Anyway, we do have completely revised engine smoothness calculations. They have been done from scratch, and that means that we do have some more realistic things in here, as you're going to see. Let's take an inline 3, for instance, 500cc, and it is not the smoothest of configurations, even at that small size, and you wouldn't expect it to be. So let's have a look here. What is on this next page, you ask? Well, look at that. Where did they come from? Balance shafts? Oh, that's new. That's something that plenty of you have been asking for over the years, that is. Not one of the most requested things ever. But it is such an important component of engine design, and interesting component too, that we thought we implement that. So this should not really be called balance shaft, but rather balance, engine balance. And you can choose to have none, and let's see what this does. So you can choose none, a harmonic damper, and that one already, for a rough engine configuration like the inline 3, does help quite a bit. They are a bitch to engineer, that's for sure, but they are not that costly to implement. So always viable if you want to invest the engineering time. Then we have balance shafts for the inline 3. That is basically a requirement, especially for early or for larger configurations. The 60/60 here would run nicely, even like everything above 50 is not a problem. But the higher you go with the imbalance, the lower the maximum revs will go. So if you look at these numbers here, 12,400, and you put balance shaft on there, that goes to 12,900. So even at these levels of imbalance, or rather balance, in this case 65, going down to 0 there is a significant difference. And of course this is more noticeable when you're larger and don't rev it as high. So let's make the engine slightly larger and see what it does. Also, I want to get rid of the excessive cam profile, because that is something else that is much more important now. Cam profile does affect operational smoothness, and operational smoothness is something that we were seeing in those numbers. So anyway, this now is pretty much impossible to make. That just sucks. as you can see. This revs to 5.7 without problems now, at 24 smoothness. And if we... Does this actually change? Yes. Okay. So you can see that it directly affects these numbers and the smoothness rating that we have there. So it goes to 33. But now let's put some the first harmonic damper on. Yeah, that's a lot better. So 300 revs more and balance shafts. All of a sudden 6.7. So almost a usable engine. No, very much a usable engine actually. And getting close to 50. So larger capacity rough engines, of course, are then more viable if you have balance shafts. Or you would say that they become viable as you actually put balance shafts in there. They are not viable without, because you just run into so many problems, also for reliability and such. Now let's go to a very smooth configuration. So the inline 6 has a very high base smoothness. 2.5 liter inline 6 is super smooth, and you can see that it's almost at 90, sitting at 90. But of course, inline 6s don't have balance shafts. So you can choose a harmonic damper, sure, if you want to. Don't really need to, because they are fine without. But if you want to crank out this if you want to have this little bit of extra smoothness in there, then yeah. So for your high-end sports cars or luxury cars, that would still be a viable option. So some engine configurations have balance shafts, others don't. One thing that you also notice, let's go to the inline 4 to really see it, is that implementing a balance shaft, of course, has a bit of a cost to it. Let's go to the efficiency. And where are we at with our cam profile? Yeah, that's fine. Let's go to 35. There. Alright. So if we put a harmonic damper on, we reduce the efficiency ever so slightly. It's just a lump of metal at the end of the crank, of course. So not really an issue. And then if we go for balance shafts, oh yes, that's a little larger in influence, as you can see there. So it takes away a bit of fuel economy, and more importantly, as you can see, power. As you go, well, for this low revving engine, it's not too much of an issue. But let me show you something, because this is not the only thing that we have put in there and revised. I've spent a lot of time revising the friction calculations of the engine, and that you see here. Now we have a new graph. I know it's not very readable at the moment, but that's going to change. And now the engine friction is no longer an amorphous blob of data, but rather it is split up into somewhat accurately modeled friction components for the accessories, the crank, the pistons, and the valve train. And you can see how that varies over the rev range. And this is not torque, but rather in kilopascal. This is the friction mean effective pressure that you see here. So, for instance, if you go from... friction mean effective pressure is already written on top, so it's just this one that is wrong. This should read kilopascal or like pressure and then in kilopascal. So we have a very smooth low friction valve train at the moment. And this is the rose-colored line you see here. And you see that, as a percentage, or the pressure actually decreases as you increase the revs. And that is because at low revs, turning the valve train is actually really hard. But if you are at high revs, then they are kind of bouncing by themselves. So as a proportion of the overall friction of the engine, that actually goes down. So now let's see what happens if we switch to pushrod. Well, they have a lot more friction down below. And of course, if you go to really large size, that one just exploded. I think we need balance shafts. There they are back. Okay. Yeah, that engine didn't want to run. But yes, we are sitting up there. You can now see that actually the valve train is the largest contribution to friction at low RPM for that valve train. And if we go to dual overhead cam again, you can see it drop nicely. Now let's take a quick look at what the crank does. Well, that's a bad example because this one this one won't rev. Yeah, let's drop this to somewhat more reasonable capacity. 2.4 liters, perfect. So the crank, this is the blue line here. That is extremely hard to read, basically impossible. But you see how much difference that makes. The contributions of the balance shaft is just massive, especially at higher RPM there. So yes, if you want to make high performance engines, balance shafts not really what you're looking for if you want to eke out all the performance you can get. But that is also why they tend to be smaller, and then like skip balance shafts if you want to have all the power. But it's a minor thing for anything that is a little larger and needs them anyway, and you really don't care in a massive luxury engine if it has balance shafts and thus loses 3% of its power or something. Who cares, right? It has ample amounts of power. And of course also family quality, very important for the friction overall, as you can see, and for basically everything. Family quality is important for everything, but we've talked about that already. So now let's make something that actually revs. V12 tiny. How large? 2.7 liter V12, and you can put a harmonic damper on there if you want to. But what I want to show you is a change that we made to cam profile, a very simple one. With the... Oh yes, what is this? Have you seen it already? No, you have not. Bam bam, there we go, feature creep, here we come. Springs and lifters. So you now have a setting for how stiff the springs are supposed to be. And this is not yet implemented. Well, the slider is, and you can change values, and it changes the friction. That is the part that is implemented, but it doesn't actually change the spring stiffness at the moment. But this is coming, and what we did here is, for the cam profile, scale the effect by a factor 1.2 of the slider. So basically what you now have is cam profile 0 to 120 at the top. So this is what you see here is cam profile 120, and you see there, oh yes, this is actually a naturally aspirated engine that peaks out at 10,500 without any kind of magic going on. And there, we now have it. If you increase the quality on this one a little further, you see we are actually peaking at 11,000, which is about where, where you get into ridiculous levels of, well, this is more or less a bike engine. And we're not going to, no, we're not going to increase the rev limiter. That has massive technical implications that we're not seeing as viable whatsoever to change. So no, never. This is a definite never. But this was a definite, very likely not, and now we have it. This is, though, a never. Just to make that clear. But yes, so what this is going to do, the springs and lifters, I want to show you in action really, but what this is going to do is basically modify the valve float point and give a very sharp drop-off. So for low-tuned engines, you usually run into this problem. Like, look at this. So cam profile 30, of course this is not a good build or anything, but a cam profile 30 engine or 20 engine still happily should rev all the way to like 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, but it shouldn't make any power there. So for especially when you're on a dual overhead cam that just revs forever and doesn't care. But what you then can do is go in there and, oh, that's another thing I'm going to show you, and go in there and just decrease your springs and lifters until you have the desired cutoff. And what this is going to do is make the engine smoother. It's not, oh well, it's not tied into operational smoothness at the moment, but what it's going to do is reduce the friction of the engine, rather, and then produce a cutoff where you need it. So you scale it down until they are soft enough to produce a cutoff where you need it. So quite handy that. Or if you want to push the engine harder and harder and make it possible to rev higher, then you would increase the stiffness. Of course, one thing that you saw missing on the family page was VVL. That has now been turned into a variant thing. So you can now make a VVL variant of your engine family. So that is something that was requested as well from time to time. It is kind of neither here or there. You could argue that, yeah, it's a family thing because it's so heavily, so engineering heavy. an option that you, from the start, basically need to accommodate for that. Otherwise, you have to re-engineer the whole head. But yeah, it doesn't really matter that much if we just slap on a massive amount of engineering time on this one. So, should be okay. Turbo revamp stuff has not happened yet. That is something that I have not even started work on yet. But, oh, look at that! More things that have changed. Fuel system tab, intake stuff not done yet either. I've spent a few days revamping the actual resonance calculations and stuff as well. So we will have new exhaust resonances and profiles for the headers, as well as for the whole list of intakes that we are going to get. Those are already prepared, but not yet implemented. So what do we have here? Well, fuel type selection. And as you can see, we have a bit of a new selection here that's going on. Let me explain what's going on here. So low quality letter to be regular, premium, super, ultimate, and then in sandbox, only in sandbox, not in campaign, you have access to avgas, aviation fuel, and that's 110 RON. You have ethanol, 130, and no, we're not simulating the actual increased usage of that fuel that would come with selecting it, because the energy density is so much lower, but you can just flood the system with it. The add to fuel ratio would be entirely different. And then we have DevMeth, 200 octane. So 110, 130, and 200. And 200 is basically the fuck you card. And you can do whatever you like. There's no way you max that out. I think the highest I've reached was 150 or something. So this is just for if you want to play around and maybe optimize a turbo without having to run into knock all the time, then just select this and you're good. The more interesting aspect of this is what is down below. This is this one. We currently here have an... this is knocking because it's 97. Right. So this is the setting which you sell the car as. So you're saying to the customer, telling the customer, this is running on RON 95. And then it really isn't. So in this case you would be going 98. This is actually tuned to run on 98, but you're selling it as 95. What this does is, well, it looks at the distribution of fuel qualities. And usually, if you buy 95, that's basically a 97 to 98, 99 RON, because they have a pretty large margin on the fuel quality usually. But if you get a really bad batch, you might be at 95 or even below that. And then this engine wouldn't be happy at all and knock you out of your seat in the car. So that is going to be partially simulated with this. And you can do something like, for instance, you can say that it runs on 98, but, well, this is a bad example. Oh, you can retune it. But actually, you have tuned your engine to run on 91. So what that does is that your customers will, in no circumstances, basically no circumstances, worst weather conditions like 50 degrees, so what is that in Fahrenheit? 130, 140 or something, and you can run that happily there. Like worst atmospheric conditions, worst batch of fuel, you're happy because everything runs. That is not really viable because you're sacrificing a lot of stats, but where your happy point is depends on what your aims are. So this is kind of an interesting consideration, and it will give you, which it currently doesn't yet, it will give you the effects of your choice here, of your tuning in there, like increased reliability because people don't run into knock as often under certain circumstances, and yeah, in general you can also do well, this would also mean that your engine actually performs on average better than if you use modern fuel systems. That is, if you have a direct injection system, then it would automatically calibrate itself to the fuel quality and thus give you more performance. So this would also be like, well, the engine says it's producing 127 point something kilowatt, but actually it is producing 135. So this feels like a stronger engine. And that will give you company reputation and so on. So interesting entangled effects that we're going for here. And I think, as I've already mentioned what we're doing with the redesign of some of the resonances, not so much a change for the headers, but a big change coming for the intake side. I've pretty much exhausted what has been implemented so far. And, well, I hope you enjoyed, and see you guys next time.